If I were the devil, if I were the devil, if I were the prince of darkness, I'd want to engulf the whole world in darkness, and I'd have a third of its real estate and 4/5 of its population, but I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree, thee. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And the old I would teach to pray after me, Our Father, which art in Washington. And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed. And with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect to discipline emotions. Just let those run wild. Until before you knew it, you'd have to have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress. And in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd make the symbol of Easter an egg and the symbol of Christmas a bottle. If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who wanted until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. And what'll you bet? I couldn't get whole states to promote gambling as the way to get rich. I would caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism, in moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. And thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there is no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing.
Paul Harvey. Good day.
Oh my goodness, wasn't that Paul Harvey recording from 1965 pretty eye-opening? And if you didn't know it was from 1965, you would think it was talking about our time. Well, welcome to Uncovering Our Hidden History. So happy to have you. My name is Anna. I am a genealogist and a historical researcher. And if you are joining us for the first time, welcome. We're happy to have you. And it would be in your best interest to go back, click on the channel's icon to find the playlist and go start with the 3 World War video 1 in this series and work your way through so that you have context. And in today's video, we are continuing with our 3 world wars. Again, we are going over the Third World War, and this is part 3C. Boy, did I find some things for you guys. And I think it's going to bring a lot of clarity to your own research and I was able to we're going to expose some of those people, the ones that we always call the they. Yeah. So I found their rat's nest, and we're going to start talking about who they are and what they've been up to. I'm going to be pulling from Dr. John Coleman's hierarchy of the 300, or Committee of 300, and he wrote that, I believe, in 1991. I think it was, if I remember correctly, published in 1993. And again, as we read through those, I think you're going to see just how far those plans have gotten. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into this document, because we have a lot to cover today. Okay, let me pull up my slideshow. Okay, the Third World War Agenda, Part 3C. And this is our fair use warning, allowing us to use other people's research, or pieces of other people's research for criticism, for teaching, for showing, not copying. So we're not going to get ourselves in trouble with any copyright infringements. Okay, I'm on the ball this week. Viewer discretion warning. This video is definitely not suitable for children under the age of 16 for a couple of reasons. Some of the things in here are graphic. And then I also do not, as we're reading through Dr. Coleman's article or his paper, I don't want to create trauma for young people listening, right? It's going to be traumatic enough for those of us who are adults. We don't want to completely traumatize and shut down the children. So please, this is not a family education thing today. This is adults only, okay? Later on, if you have 16-year-olds or older, 15 or 16-year-olds or older, and you think that, however it rolls in your home, if you think that they need to know this, then that's up to you. But for the first time around, let's just keep it adults only, okay? All right. So to summarize our last video from Part 3B, we covered that the Zionist Jews own all of America, right? Pretty much. They own all the Mockingbird media outlets, TV, radio, newspapers, internet, etc. They own Hollywood and the movie industry, all the music and record companies, even the Christian record labels, big pharma and illicit drug operations, the porn industry, and all major food companies, such as the ones I'm listing here are the big ones, but each one of these have subgroupings. Kraft, Nabisco, Nestle, Mars, PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, and Kellogg's. Okay, which you can see from this chart. And by the way, you definitely are going to want to take screenshots today. Lot of very important information. I have charts that you will want to take screenshots of so that you can study them out, okay? Although the Zionist Jews are the front men for all of those industries, it is not the Zionists that actually control our Babylonian world. Would you like to know who does actually rule? Okay. Here is a chart I found. I think it probably very accurately describes the hierarchy, the pyramid hierarchy. Of course, at the very, very top, you've got Lucifer with the eye. And then under that, the world monarch. And this was Queen Elizabeth II, and so now most likely it's King Charles, which should make us wonder what is going on with President Trump over in Britain right now with these banquets and these meetings that he's having with Charles. I think there's definitely more than meets the eye there. Okay, then under the world monarch, we have the Crown Council of 13. These are the world's richest, most powerful families. And if you remember John Todd from the last video, his Collins family was one of the families that sat on that council. He sat on that council in representation of his family. And then under that, we've got the Committee of 300. These are the world's richest, most powerful subfamilies. And then we've got the think tanks. Okay, this is your Trilateral Commission, your Council on Foreign Relations, the United Nations, the actual round table that all of those are a part of, the Bilderberg Group, Club of Rome, and the Royal Institute for International Affairs, RIF. Okay, underneath the think tanks, you've got the world's financial control with the world banks, and then the central banks, tax revenue, interest revenue, and then all of the world's resources, okay, come underneath that with all their corporations. And then under that, we see the world's population control. These are the governments. So those puppet leaders from every nation, right? Your prime ministers, your presidents, they're pretty much at the bottom of the food chain. Okay, well, actually, those of us that they term goyim, cattle, right? They call us the useless eaters. We're actually at the bottom, the very, very bottom. We have no value, according to them. Other than a few of us, those that will, survive all of their resets and their eugenics program, the ones that make it, they deem worthy to be their slaves. They just go straight to the black pope. Apparently the white pope is the people's pope. It's the face of the Vatican, but no real power. Okay, it's just for show. And then under the black pope, who is the superior general of the Jesuits, then you've got the Jesuits themselves, and then the Vatican Treasury, Bank of Rome, central banks, sovereign military orders, the secret orders, Knights Templar, Jesuit universities, capitalism, and then on down it goes. So again, I mentioned this in another video. So within the Jesuits, or within the Vatican, you've got the white pope, then you've got the black pope. I think this is still Arturo Sosa. I'm not sure if that is or not, but he's superior general. And then, of course, both are controlled by the gray pope, which, to my knowledge, is still Pepe Orsini. Although this is a very young picture of him, he's quite a bit older now. Okay. And then here's a screen showing the Jesuits' rule. So you can see everything that they have their fingers into. And then in the very middle circle, you've got Jesuit black popes. Okay, and then in the outer circle with all of the little spikes or the flames, you've got the papal bloodlines. So Farnese, Borgia, Gaetani, Orsini, Aldobrandini, Conti, Chigi, Pamphili, Medici, however you want to pronounce that, Colonna. So that's there. And then in the circle outside of those families, you have the Papal Occult Noble Council. Okay, so again, please feel free to take pictures of all of these. Now, here is a picture of the more prominent ones, but there are actually 13 bloodlines total. So here you see at the top left is Farnese and Borgia Colonna, which I don't know. He's got, what's up with the creepy red gloves? I don't know. Then you've got Gaetoni, Medici or Medici. And some of these we're going to come back to later when we do a deeper dive down these papal bloodlines. Okay. Pamphili, Orsini, again, Pepe Orsini is from the Orsini bloodline. Then you've got the Aldobrandinis. And from what I've read about the Aldobrandinis, they are a scary, scary lot. They tend to be very scary. That's what some people say who've written about them. And then you've got Chigi and then Conti. Not listed here. Definitely the Este bloodline is big. That's ESTE. Okay, and we'll be coming back to them later. And then I can't remember the other two, but there is 13 total. And then here are some of their crests. Again, take a screenshot of this and then you can blow it up and see. I do happen to know that that top left one on the top row with the white bird, that is the crest or the symbol for the Este family. Okay, and so these are some of the papal bloodlines I just mentioned are part of these, and then there's some other ones that these hail more to like the black nobility families, the crests for the black nobility, Italian families. Okay, and then here we've got another diagram for the round table, and of course its formation is the 6-pointed star. No surprise. Okay, and then this one you definitely are going to want to take a screenshot of. I got this one from the back of Dr. Coleman's paper or his PDF, and it just, some of this, we're going to be talking about a lot of these groups this week and then in the next video as well, and you'll kind of see what they're over. Okay. And then of course we have this web, which is the order of the Illuminati. And so you'll definitely want to take a screenshot of this as well if you don't already have it. And we are going to be doing deeper dives in future videos on, in the near future, on the Illuminati and the Rothschilds. I did cover the Rockefellers somewhat. And yeah, and then some of these like the CFR, the Royal Institute for International Affairs, United Nations, these, the Council of the Committee of 300 and the Club of Rome, these are going to come up in some of our studies today. So again, we're going to be I've pulled information from The Conspirators' Hierarchy, the Story of the Committee of 300 by Dr. John Coleman. And we're going to read the foreword from his book or his paper so you can understand who he was. He says, "In my career as a professional intelligence officer, I had many occasions to access highly classified documents. But during service as a political science officer in the field in Angola, West Africa, I had the opportunity to view a series of top-secret classified documents which were unusually explicit. What I saw filled me with anger and resentment and launched me on a course from which I have not deviated, namely that to uncover what power it is that controls and manages the British and the United States governments. I was thoroughly familiar with all of the well-known secret societies, such as the Royal Institute for International Affairs, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderbergers, Trilaterals, the Zionists, Freemasons, and Bolshevism, Rosicrucianism, and all of the spin-offs of these secret societies. As an intelligence officer, and even before that as a young student in the course of my studies at the British Museum in London, I had cut my eye teeth on all of them, plus a good number of others with whom I imagined Americans were familiar. But when I came to the United States in 1969, I found that names like the Order of St. John of Jerusalem, the Club of Rome, the German Marshall Fund, the Cini Foundation, the Round Table, the Fabianists, the Venetian Black Nobility, the Mont Pelerin Society, Hellfire Clubs, and many others were at best totally unknown here in America, or else their true functions were at best but poorly understood, if at all. In 1969 to 1970, he says, I set about remedying the situation in a series of monographs and cassette tapes. Much to my surprise, I soon found plenty of people willing to quote these names as if they had known of them all of their writing careers. But these people were not in the least bit knowledgeable about the subjects, yet quite unwilling to state the source of their lately acquired information. I consoled myself with the thought that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So he's basically saying people were copying his work, but really knew nothing of it. So he says, I consoled myself with the thought that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. I pursued my investigations, pressing on in the face of severe risks, attacks on myself and my wife, financial losses, continual harassment, threats, and calumny, all part of a carefully crafted and orchestrated program to discredit me. And that's basically what calumny is to discredit in a negative light. Run by the government agents and informers embedded in the so-called Christian right wing, the identity movement, and right-wing patriotic groups. These agents operated and still operate under cover of strong and fearless outspoken opposition to Judaism, their main enemy, they would have you believe. These agent informers are led and controlled by a group of homosexuals who are well-liked and well-respected by political and religious conservatives all across the United States. Their program of calumny, lies, and hatred, disinformation about my work, even lately attributing it to other writers, continues unabated, but it has not had the desired effect. I shall carry on with my task until I have finally ripped off the mask of the entire secret upper-level parallel government that runs Britain and the U.S. This book is a part of that ongoing effort. And he signed it Dr. John Coleman, November 1991. And, I've tried to see if he is still alive or if he passed, and I can't seem to find that information. So I hope he's still with us somewhere. Because he is a very, very, very brave man. Okay. So all of those groups he mentioned are all part of the New World Order / OneWorldGovernment. Okay. And that is what we're also being told on the back of our $1 bill. Novus Ordo Seclorum. Okay. And we're not waiting for it to happen. It's already here. It's already in play. And I think, I don't know, probably, well, we know that President George H. Bush started using that term in 1990. So, but I think it's been about before that. So let's talk about the Club of Rome and their Committee of 300. Dr. Coleman is going to tell us about these people. All of the next several slides are from him, and you'll know because I have quotations around the statements. He says, certainly a fair number of us are aware that the people running our government are not the people who are really in control of political and economic matters, domestic or foreign. This has led many to seek the truth in the alternative press, those newsletter writers who, like me, have sought but not always found what it is that is making the United States terminally ill. Seek and ye shall find has not always been the case with this group. What we did find was that the people walk in great darkness, most of humanity, mostly not caring or bothering to find out where their country is headed, firm in the belief that it will always be there for them. This is the way the largest population group has been manipulated to react, and their attitude plays right into the hands of the secret government. We frequently hear about they doing this, that, or the other. They seem literally to be able to get away with murder. They increase taxes, send our sons and daughters to die in wars that do not benefit our country. They seem above our reach, out of sight, a frustrating nebulous when it comes to taking action against them. No one seems to be able to clearly identify who they are. It is a situation that has pertained for decades. During the course of this book, we shall identify the mysterious they, and then after that, it is up to the people to remedy their situation. On the 30th of April, 1981, I wrote a monograph disclosing the existence of the Club of Rome, identifying it as a committee of 300 subversive body. This was the first mention both of these organizations in the United States. I warned readers not to be fooled by the feeling that the article was far-fetched, and I drew a parallel between my article and the warning issued by the Bavarian government when the secret plans of the Illuminati fell into its hands. We shall return to the Club of Rome and the role of the Committee of 300 in U.S. affairs later herein. In what is, in fact, an open conspiracy against God and man, which includes enslaving the majority of humans left on this earth after their wars, plagues, and mass murder have done away with them. It is not well hidden. In the intelligence community, it is taught that the best way to hide something is to place it in open view. As an example of the foregoing, when Germany wanted to hide its prized new Messerschmitt fighter plane in 1938, the aircraft was put on display at the Paris Air Show. While secret agents and spies were collecting information from hollow tree trunks and from behind loose bricks in a wall, the information they sought was staring them right in the face. The upper level parallel secret government does not operate from dank basements and secret underground chambers. It places itself in full view in the White House, Congress, and in number 10 Downing Street, and the Houses of Parliament. It is like to those weird and supposedly terrifying monster films, where the monster appears with distorted features, long hair, and even longer teeth, growling and slavering all over the place. This is distraction. The real monsters wear business suits and drive to work on Capitol Hill in limousines. These men and women are in open view. These men and women are the servants of the OneWorldGovernment / New World Order. Like the rapist who stops to offer his victim a friendly ride, he does not look like the monster that he is. If he did, his intended victim would run off screaming in fright. The same applies to government at all levels. President George H.W. Bush does not look like a dutiful servant of the upper level parallel government, but make no mistake about it, He is such a monster, as are those horrors found in horror movies. As we shall see, even the Olympians do not hide their faces. Oftentimes they put on a show which could be likened to the Paris Air Show, even as conspiracy buffs spend their time in fruitless searching in the wrong places and in the wrong direction. For example, note how the Queen, Elizabeth II, performs the ceremonial opening of the British Parliament. There, in full view, is the head of the Committee of 300. It's her. Have you ever witnessed the swearing-in ceremony of a United States president? There, in full view, is another member of the Committee of 300. The problem is only one of perception. Who are the conspirators who serve the mighty, all-powerful Committee of 300? The better informed of our citizens are aware that there is a conspiracy, and the conspiracy goes under various names such as the Illuminati, Freemasonry, the Round Table, the Milner Group. To them, the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilaterals represent most of what they do not like in regard to domestic and foreign policy. Some even know that the Round Table has a big input into United States affairs through the British ambassador in Washington. The problem is that the real hard information on the treasonous activities of members of the invisible government is very hard to come by. It is this Committee of 300 which has established control networks and mechanisms far more binding than anything ever seen in this world. Chains and ropes are not needed to restrain us. Our fear of what is to come does that job far more efficiently than any physical means of restraint. We have been brainwashed to give up our constitutional right to bear arms, to give up our Constitution itself, to allow the United Nations to exercise control over our foreign policies, and the IMF, which is the International Monetary Fund, to take control of our fiscal and monetary policies, to permit the President to break United States law with impunity by invading a foreign country and kidnapping its head of state. In short, we have been brainwashed to the extent where we, as a nation, will accept each and every lawless act carried out by our government almost without question. I, for one, says Dr. Coleman, know that we will soon have to fight to reclaim our country from the committee or lose it forever. But when it comes right down to it, how many will actually take up arms? In 1776, only 3% of the populace took up arms against King George III. This time around, 3% will be woefully inadequate. We should not allow ourselves to be led down dead-end roads, for that is what our mind controllers have planned for us by confronting us with such a complexity of issues that we simply succumb to long-range penetration and make no decisions at all on many of the issues because we'll just shut down. It's so overwhelming. The enemy that has directed them to this point decided to make a strong move against the United States in 1980, so that the quote-unquote renaissance of America would be impossible. Well, who is the enemy? The enemy is no faceless they. The enemy is clearly identifiable as the Committee of 300, the Club of Rome, NATO, and all of its affiliated organizations, the think tanks and research institutes controlled by Tavistock. There is no need to use they or the enemy except as shorthand. We know who they are. The enemy is the Committee of 300 with its Eastern liberal establishment aristocracy, aristocracy, its many banks, its insurance companies, its giant corporations, its foundations and philanthropic groups, its communication networks, all presided over by a hierarchy of conspirators. This is the enemy. Down through the ages, rulers have delighted in running things from behind the scenes. Man has always felt the need to dominate, and nowhere and at no time is the desire more prevalent than in this modern era. If it were not so, why all the need for secret societies? If we are ruled by an open system run by democratically elected officials, why the need for a secret Masonic order in every village, town, and city across the United States? How is it that Freemasonry can operate so openly and yet keep its secrets so well hidden? We can't ask the 9 unknown men of the 9 Sisters Lodge in Paris that question, nor can we ask it of their 9 fellows in the Quatuor Coronati Lodge in London. Yet these 18 men form part of an even more secret government, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, and beyond that, the Committee of 300. How is it that the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry could brainwash John Hinckley to shoot President Reagan? Why do we have such secret orders as the Knights of St. John of Jerusalem, the Round Table, the Milner Group, and so on down the line of secret societies? They form part of the worldwide chain of command and control running through the Club of Rome, NATO, the RIIA, and finally right to the conspirators' hierarchy themselves, the Committee of 300. Men need these secret societies because their deeds are evil and must be hidden. Evil cannot stand in the light of truth. Oops, covering that. Oops. The voluminous, all-pervading, and enormous social psychiatry apparatus put in place by the Tavistock Institute and its huge web of related capabilities has been under the control of one single entity, and that entity is still in control as we enter 1992 or 2025. That single entity, the conspirators' hierarchy, is called the Committee of 300. It is a power structure and a power center that operates far beyond the reach of any single world leader or government, including the United States government and its presidents. As the late John F. Kennedy found out, the Kennedy murder was an operation of the Committee of 300, and we shall return to that. The Committee of 300 is the ultimate secret society made up of an untouchable ruling class, which includes the Queen of England, the Queen of Netherlands, the Queen of Denmark, and all the royal families of Europe. These aristocrats decided at the death of Queen Victoria, who was the matriarch of the Venetian black nobility Guelph bloodline family, that in order to gain worldwide control, it would be necessary for its corporate business on a global scale. And so the doors to ultimate power were opened to what the Queen of England likes to refer to as the commoners. So just to go back there for a second, I think I will cover this in next week's video, but so the Guelph, or sometimes it's called the Welf bloodline, comes out of the Este Venetian black nobility family. The Guelph bloodline is one of the older bloodline families, and then so apparently Queen Victoria was part of that bloodline family as well, which of course then would make all of her descendants part of that as well. The Club of Rome is a conspiratorial umbrella organization. Basically, it's a marriage between Anglo-American financiers and the old black nobility families of Europe, particularly the so-called nobility of London, Venice, and Genoa. I don't know how to pronounce that either. Genoa. The key to the successful control of the world is their ability to create and manage savage economic recessions and depressions. The Committee of 300 looks to social convulsions on a global scale, followed by depressions, as a softening up technique for bigger things to come. As its principal method of creating masses of people all over the world who will become its welfare recipients for the future. Part of the communism, right? That's coming. You will own nothing and be happy. Broadly, the anticipated counter-program of the Club of Rome would cover inventing and disseminating post-industrialization ideas in the United States, coupled with the spread of counterculture movements such as drugs, rock, sex, hedonism, Satanism, witchcraft, and environmentalism. Tavistock Institute, Stanford Research Institute, and the Institute for Social Relations. In fact, the entire wide spectrum of research organization in applied social psychiatry, either had delegates on the board of the Club of Rome or acted as advisors and played a guiding role in NATO's attempt to adopt the Aquarian conspiracy. In this book, we shall find an almost complete list of the conspirators, their institutions, fronts, and publications. In 1980, the Aquarian conspiracy was in full swing, and its success can be seen in every facet of our private and national life. The overwhelming rise in mindless violence, serial killers, teenage suicides, the unmistakable signs of lethargy, what they call long-range penetration, is a part of our new environment, as dangerous, if not more so, than the polluted air that we breathe. The coming of the age of Aquarius caught America totally unprepared. We as a nation were not prepared for the changes about to be forced upon us. Now, I'm going to stop here for a second. I want you to think about what he just said. He's writing this. So the age of the Aquarian conspiracy came on full force 1980. He's writing this book 1991, and he's talking about the mindless violence, serial killers, teenage suicides, okay, lethargy, all of that. How much more rampant is that in our day today? It's crazy. It's just amped up. It's so bad right now. The age of Aquarius, he says, was best described by Tavistock Institute as the vehicle for delivering turbulence. Okay, so all of what I just mentioned is the goal of the Tavistock group was tasked with doing in order to deliver social turbulence. There are three distinct phases in this response and reaction to the stress displayed by large social groups. First, there is superficiality. The population under attack will defend itself with slogans. This does not identify the source of the crisis and therefore does nothing to address it. Hence, the crisis continues to persist. The second phase is fragmentation. This occurs as the crisis continues and social order breaks down. Then there is the third phase where the population group goes into self-realization and turns away from the induced crisis, and there follows a maladaptive response accompanied with active synoptic idealism and disassociation. Like it just becomes so, so think about 2020, right? And the whole COVID thing. So that's a perfect example, okay? That was probably the most recent in our time. And eventually, at some point, it just becomes so overwhelming that people just disassociate. right? And then go and numb themselves, find other things to numb themselves with, like, alcohol, drugs, eating, food, whatever, because it's too unbearable. Everybody's left with a sense of helplessness, afraid, but not knowing where to direct, where the fear is coming from. Who can deny that with the huge increase in drug usage, crack, cocaine, making thousands of instant new addicts each day, the shocking rise in the murder of infants each day, which is called aborticide, which by now far exceeds casualties suffered by our armed forces in both World Wars, I and II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. The open acceptance of homosexuality and lesbianism, whose rights are protected by more and more laws each year. The terrible plague we call AIDS, and all of the other sexually transmitted diseases, washing over our towns and our cities. The total failure of our education system. The stunning increase in the divorce rate. A murder rate that shocks the rest of the world into disbelief. Satanic serial killings, the disappearance of thousands of young children snatched off of our streets by perverts, a virtual tidal wave of pornography accompanied by permissiveness on our television screens. Who can deny that this nation is in crisis, which we are not addressing and from which we are turning away? Again, how much more is it since he's writing this in 1991? Now, well-meaning people who specialize in these things blame a lot of the problem on the education system, or what passes for it in the United States. Criminals now abound in the 9 to 15-year-old age groups. Rapists are quite common as young as 10-year-olds. Our social specialists, the teachers' unions, our churches, all say it is due to the faulty education system, which again, remember, was begun by John D. Rockefeller Jr., Sr. and Jr. Witness how test scores keep dropping. The specialists bewail the fact that the United States now ranks around 39th in the level of education of the whole world. Why do we bemoan what is so obvious? Our education system was programmed to self-destruct. That was what Dr. Alexander King was sent here by NATO to arrange. That is what Justice Hugo Black was ordered to arrange. The fact is, the Committee of 300, with the approval of our government, does not want our youth to be properly educated. The education that Freemason Justice Hugo Black, Alexander King, Gunnar Myrdal and his wife came to give the children of the United States is that crime pays and expediency is what counts. Now again, he's, I guess in 1991, American education was 39th in the list. I would be very curious to find out what we are now, as we're going to see by these next few slides. Thanks to Dr. Alexander King, a man very few people in America know about, education in the U.S. is at its lowest since 1786. Statistics produced by the Institute for Higher Learning show that the reading and writing capabilities of high school children in the United States are lower than they were among high school children in 1786. Well, folks, in case you guys aren't paying attention to what's going on in our public schools now, I have some screenshots that I've been taking because I've actually been looking into this, and it's horrific. It is really, really horrific what's happening. So in this screenshot below, these are all teachers that are talking about why they're quitting. You know, this first lady, she says, I quit my teaching job. The second gentleman, and these are all people who are on YouTube talking about it. And it says why teachers are leaving the job in droves and why are they quitting. And then this third lady, she says, I actually watched hers, the third lady. She is a music teacher, and she talks about students coming in and just destroying the instruments, like literally taking all the strings out. And so she tried to stop one student. She said, I had another kid in the same class flip me off and then try to lie about it. And then she also said that one got violent with her. And then, again, so teachers by the droves, this is becoming an epidemic. They're quitting. I personally know of a couple of teachers that I went to, friends that I went to college with, that became teachers, and the school systems were so bad after COVID, after, you know how they made all the kids stay home, and then they started letting them go back, but then they had to wear masks, and then they had to stay home again, and then, so their education was fragmented. But it's been so bad with some of these kids that both of my friends took early retirement because they just could not deal with it anymore. Okay, so it says, seems to be getting worse. Quitting by the dozens. Teachers are fed up with student misbehavior. Survey reveals 98% of teachers say stress and burnout are very serious or somewhat serious problems. Teachers, the bottom one says, teachers are scared of Gen Alpha's technology addiction. Okay. Students in some of the public school classrooms, now I know this isn't happening in every single classroom, but students in public school classrooms are flying into rages and destroying the classrooms, overturning desks, and in some cases are biting, hitting, or choking the teachers. I watched an interview with one teacher who did not want to be seen, and she talks about that she's had some, a handful of students or a couple students choke her, bite her, scratch her, and she cannot defend. She's not allowed to touch the student. She can't push the student. The teachers are not allowed to physically put their hands on the students. Okay, so it's gotten so bad now that they have a code word that the teacher will use called, I think it's called clearing the classroom, clear the classroom. And all of the other students are evacuated out of the classroom while this one student or two students, whoever's causing the problems, is left in there by themselves. And you can see from these pictures what they're doing to these classrooms. This one lady said that after one of the students choked her, had her on her back and was pressing her down, choking her. When he came out of his rage, she asked him to please get off of her. He apologized and then turned around and spit on her. So this is what some of our teachers are having to deal with, and they're not allowed to defend themselves. They can't put their hands on the student to subdue them. Okay. And then you can see on the upper right picture, same situations are happening on the school buses. These poor school bus drivers who are having to deal with rude kids and kids, elementary kids cussing them out and calling them names. This kid, I don't know what they were waiting on, but he just climbed out of the window. Okay. And then you can see in the bottom picture, this is I believe a teacher with marks, and I don't know if that's from pinching or scratching. I don't necessarily see bite marks, but these kids don't know how to manage their emotions when they get angry, and they're not being, there's no consequences for them. And this is what Dr. Coleman is saying. And I don't think all of this was even happening when Dr. Coleman wrote that. We're seeing it now, but it's by design. It's on purpose. Okay. Now, Now we've also got other teachers that are saying that they quit teaching because the students are graduating high school, middle school, high school, and they can't read. They don't know how to read. They don't know how to spell. They're fed up with the kids in high school using Chat GPT or TP. I never do get that right. Writing their papers for them. So they're using technology to write their papers or to spell things. They don't know how to spell. They don't know how to write. And they don't really know how to read. And the stress, especially on some of these younger, newer teachers, it's just like they'd rather go get a job somewhere else. It's not rewarding, because the children don't want to learn. They're not motivated to learn. Some of them, many of them. Now, even more shocking than this is about what I'm about to show you. Apparently, teachers having inappropriate sexual relations with their students has become an epidemic. And I was shocked. I thought it would, kind of be equal percentages of male teachers and female teachers. But when I was researching and Googling, I found out that it seems to be more of these young female teachers. And so, these women are in their 20s, maybe early 30s, and they are sexually molesting and or grooming young men to have sexual relations with them. And several of these women are married. They already have husbands. And so herein I think lies the trouble with, these young ladies, in my opinion, should be teaching kindergarten. They should be teaching elementary school. They shouldn't be put in classrooms with, high school students that are, within 10 years of their age range. But it's really shocking. This top one, it says dozens of female teachers arrested for allegedly having sex with students. This is on a YouTube channel called Law Crime. The second one, the middle one, it says Christian Academy teacher sexually assaulted student. And then there's, this man teacher down below, former teacher accused of having sex with students. So that sounds like plural. These two are really bad. This top one, it says teacher accused of sexually abusing 21 kids claims she's pregnant with one of the students' babies. And she's married. Fifth grade teacher, this is the bottom one, Middle Township Elementary School number 2. Fifth grade teacher impregnated by her 12-year-old student. So, friends, this is a mess. I am so thankful that I was able to homeschool my children. I had a clear mandate from the Most High. And I always asked, when my oldest was, 4 or 5, I would pray about everything. I would pray about anything parenting, especially with my first, because I didn't know what to do. And was told, absolutely, you are to homeschool. And I would ask every year, okay, well, we did this year. What do you want me to do for next year? And the Holy Spirit, that the Ruach HaKodesh every year said that you are to homeschool these kids. And I never vaccinated them either. None of them have ever had immunizations. And again, I heard from the Holy Spirit very clearly on that. And I know that's a controversial topic, and probably even within this group. But you have to ask. You have to ask and not assume. I didn't, I've gone round and round with their pediatricians when they were younger. And I read all the books and had conversations with the doctors, the pediatricians, who would get so frustrated, would just, one told me I needed to find another pediatrician because I would ask hard questions. I said, one particular time I said, when I was younger, I, had all of 6 vaccinations from birth to the time I was 18. I said, can you please explain to me why children today are having 72 vaccines? And some of them are repeats. Many of them are repeats. And he said, well, it's because they don't always take. And I'm like, then why do you keep doing this? And it's always the herd mentality, right? Or herd coverage. Again, because we're cattle. And so you can stand up to your doctor. And if your doctor gives you a hard time, find another doctor. Try to find, doctors that are more naturopath or homeopath minded. Okay. So anyway, I just went off on my little rant, but I'm just thankful that my children did not go through this. And I cannot imagine today that this going on. And then in California, there was I want to say, starting about 2012 to 2014, started revamping their sex ed program. And really, it should have been triple sex, triple XXX, because it was a lot of it was extremely pornographic. Okay. And so this article is from August 13th, 2014, and it says California Health Textbook Unsafe for Children Because of Sexuality Information. So thank goodness a lot of parents were going to the school board meetings and the district meetings saying, no, you cannot use this. So it says in the suburbs, for this particular article, said in the suburbs of San Francisco Bay, the Fremont Unified School District has been embroiled in a controversy over the proposed use of a respected health textbook that includes a chapter on sexual health. Opponents of the book argued that it was a college-level text whose sexuality content was unsuitable for high school students. Topics in the sexual health chapter included sexting, online dating, and explanations of paraphernalia, paraphilias, which is atypical sexual behaviors and interests, such as bestiality. Local television news station KPIX-TV reported that sexual topics also included masturbation, bondage, and orgasms, using pictures and diagrams that at least one parent called pornographic. Somebody named Ahmed and other opponents of the book, under the banner Protect Fremont Children group, created an electronic petition gathering over 2,500 signatures for their case. A hard copy petition also circulated, gathering at least 1,500 signatures. Protect Fremont Children denounced that book, Your Health Today, on charges that it exposes youth to sexual games, sexual fantasies, sexual bondage with handcuffs, ropes, and blindfolds, sexual toys and vibrator devices, and additional instruction that is extremely inappropriate for 13 and 14-year-old youth. So good for those parents. And thankfully, the Fremont Unified School District did decide not to use that book. But what made this very dangerous is that they were not giving parents the option to opt their students out of this. They were making it mandatory. So, it was not good. So moving on. So that is what our public education system today looks like. And I highly recommend that if at all possible, let me just say this. If at all possible, get your kids out of the public education system. Pray and ask for alternatives. Maybe you can find other homeschooling moms in your community, or maybe you can get together with other moms that want to leave the system too, and you guys can create some kind of a homeschooling co-op. Especially if you are both parents in the home or working, maybe you can hire a, college age babysitter or tutor to tutor them, to homeschool them. There's various online accredited programs that you can also use. Again, those should be supervised as well. There are other options, but I think the writing is on the wall. This, what we just read is that this system was always meant to self-destruct from the very beginning. And it's only going to get worse. Okay? All right, moving on. We shall be looking at the names of those who make up the Committee of 300. But before we do that, we should examine the massive interfacing of all important institutions, companies, and banks under the committee's control. We must mark them well because these are the people who are deciding who shall live and who shall be eliminated as useless eaters. They are deciding where we will worship God. Well, and what God we will worship, what we must wear, and even what we shall eat. According to Zbigniew Brzezinski, we shall be under endless surveillance around the clock for 365 days a year, ad infinitum. That we have been betrayed from within is being accepted by more and more people each year, and that is good, because it is through knowledge, a word translated from the word belief, that we shall be able to defeat the enemies of all mankind. Now, again, that was 1991. I don't know about today, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try, okay? Doesn't mean we can't, whether their plans end up going full force, it doesn't mean that we have to roll over and comply. We can be a complete thorn in their you-know-what. We can be a nuisance. We can fight and kick and scream and bite and do everything we can contrary. But let's not roll over and comply. Dr. Coleman says, if we can get enough people to see the truth, the motivation block gets weaker until it will eventually be forced aside as more and more people become enlightened, and the notion of that this cannot happen in America is done away with. The Committee of 300 is counting on our maladaptive responses to govern our reaction to created events, and it will not be disappointed as long as we as a nation in the present way we respond. We must turn our responses to their created crises into adaptive responses by identifying the conspirators and exposing their plans for us so that these things become public knowledge. Okay, we need to sound the alarm no matter how many people roll eyeballs at us, call us conspiracy theorists, right? Excuse me, I have an itch. We have to be watchmen on the wall. We have to sound the alarm. We're not responsible for people's reactions or whether they do something about it or not, but we are responsible for sounding the alarm, okay? And then the rest is up to them. The Club of Rome has already made the transition to barbarism. Instead of waiting to be raptured, we must stop the Committee of 300 before it can accomplish its complete goal of making us prisoners of the new dark age planned for us. We're going to talk about that rapture thing in an upcoming video too. Those people are going to be very disappointed if they actually read their scripture to find out that it's the tares that will be going first. Anywho, since there are already scores of books, he says, on the Council of Foreign Relations and the Trilaterals, we shall go directly to the Club of Rome and the German Marshall Fund. When I introduced these organizations to the United States, few, if any, had ever heard of them. The Club of Rome and its financiers, under the title of the German Marshall Fund, were two highly organized conspiratorial bodies operating under the cover of NATO, which is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and the majority of Club of Rome executives were drawn from NATO. The Club of Rome formulated all of what NATO claimed as its policies, and through the activities of the Committee of 300 member Lord Carrington, was able to split NATO into two factions, a political left-wing power group and its former military alliance. The Club of Rome is still one of the most important foreign policy arms of the Committee of 300, the other being the Bilderbergers. It was put together in 1968 from hardcore members of the original Morgenthau Group on the basis of a telephone call made by the late Aurelio Pecci, who was black nobility, for a new and urgent drive to speed up the plans of the One World Government, now called the New World Order, although he says, I prefer the former name. In May 1967, a meeting was organized by the Scientific and Technological Committee of the North Atlantic Assembly and the Foreign Policy Research Institute. It was called a Conference on Transatlantic Imbalance and Collaboration. They love their conferences and all their fancy names, don't they? And it was held at Queen Elizabeth's palatial property in Deauville, France. The basic purpose and intent of the conference at Deauville was to end U.S. technological and industrial progress. Okay, what this basically means is the fact that all of America's industrial operations left America and went to third world countries. Okay, that's deindustrialization. It weakened us tremendously because now we rely on China and all of these other, in Indonesia and all these other third world, well, China's not a third world nation, but all of these other nations for our goods. And I think we're seeing that now, that's come back to bite us in the behind right now, right? So that was done on purpose as well, to weaken America. Out of the conference came two books, one of which is mentioned herein, Zbigniew Brzezinski's Technotronic Era. The other was written by conference chairman Aurelio Pecci, entitled The Chasm Ahead. Pecci largely agreed with Brzezinski, but he added that there would be chaos in a future world not ruled by a one world government. In this, because we're just, you can't have the cattle running all over the place and doing whatever they want. So, we have to be, remember this goes back to the protocols, like we don't know how to run our own governments, so we have to be managed, right? So in this regard, Pecci insisted that the Soviet Union must be offered a convergence with NATO, and such a convergence ending in an equal partnership in a new world order with the United States. Both nations would be responsible for future crisis management and global planning. The first Club of Rome's global planning contract went to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or better known as MIT, one of the premier Committee of 300's research institutes. Zbigniew Brzezinski is the author of a book that should have been read by every American interested in the future of this country. Entitled The Technotronic Era, it was commissioned by the Club of Rome. The book is an open announcement of the manner and methods to be used to control the United States in the future. like during our time. It also gave notice of cloning and robotoids, i.e., people who acted like people and who seemed to be people, but who were not. Brzezinski, speaking for the Committee of 300, said the United States was moving, quote unquote, into an era unlike any of its predecessors. We were moving towards a technotronic era that could easily become a dictatorship. And Dr. Coleman says, I reported fully on the technotronic era in 1981 and mentioned it in my newsletters a number of times. Well, we don't really hear much in our day about a technotronic era so much as, what if we replace that word with technocratic? Does that sound familiar? Hence, Elon and his mother, May Musk, are technocrats, as was May's father, Dr. Joshua Norman Haldeman. Okay. Now, they lived, Dr. Haldeman was born in Canada, but then relocated and they lived in South Africa. So May, who I believe, if I remember correctly, also had a twin sister. Nobody seems to know what happened to her. And then I think there was a couple of other children too. So, and his wife grew up in South Africa. Now, the letter on the left that I'm going to read to you, and I highly suggest you screenshot this this slide. Like most of you, although some of you have been at this a lot longer, but I started, I guess, waking up 2019, 2020, and completely stopped watching television and television programming, and started watching. That's when I got into YouTube and trying to watch other researchers who had research channels. Now, one of those was a gal by the name of Tamra Desiree, and last time I tried to find her last year, and she's got a paywall put up, and I don't do paywalls. So anyway, but I was watching her, I guess 2021 or 2022 time frame for about a year. And she had said at the time that she was not opposed to going onto the dark web to look for things, because a lot of times these evil ones will communicate with one another through the dark web, and then there's even a darker level underneath that. But so this, according to Tamra Desiree, this letter on the screen, she picked off from the dark web. Okay, that was what she said. I have no way of confirming or denying that, but I took a screenshot of it, and it said Project Red Team A, Tesla Associates, Area Building 06660, Dreamland, USA. To the Red Team, thank you all for your tremendous help launching the Optimus Prime project. Without your diligence, hard work, and several late nights and early mornings, we would not have been able to meet our deadline. And we did so much more than that. Thanks to everyone's major efforts, we not only launched on time, but with a wonderful result. Your hard work has not gone unnoticed, and I, along with the entire senior management team, would like to express my deep gratitude to each and every one of you. Optimus Prime will be the name until further notice. The 5'8" model, humanoid, is for the public. The man behind the curtain, though, is Nephilim in height. Keep up the good work. Best regards, Elon R. Musk, FRS, Project Manager and CEO, Chief Engineer. And this was in 2022. that she produced this letter. So I did some digging. Now, to the right is a picture of the Generation 1 Optimus Prime, but just let that sink in a minute. His robotoys he's putting out right now supposedly are 5'8", right? Is that right? 5'8". But they've got the real one behind the curtain is a Nephilim. So now looking at these slides, I don't know if he's got a Gen 3 or 4 at this point, but this was, I think, from about a year ago I got this one. This is Optimus Gen 2. This was from December 2023. And then it's showing Tesla-designed actuators and sensors in the top right corner. And then underneath that it says 2-DOF actuated neck. So again, this is all just for the public, right? Trying to soften and get people ready for the technotronic, the technotronic era that Brzezinski was writing about, where we are going. We already have, there's several people that have talked about, they have already been cloning people, probably since at least 1940 or before. There supposedly was a movie that came out, The Boys of Brazil, and it was a big reveal of what they were actually doing. And so whatever they put out there, they're already many years ahead of whatever it is that they're introducing to the public. So keep that in mind. While at the Abundance Summit, Elon Musk indicated that there's some chance that AI, will end humanity. And while Elon didn't share how he came to this conclusion, he says that there's a 10 to 20% chance that AI might end humanity. And this is via the Business Insider. Musk thinks that potential growth areas and advances in the AI landscape should still be explored, citing, quote unquote, I think that the probable positive scenario outweighs the negative scenario. But when I looked a little further into this, there are other experts in this field that say that those percentages of AI ending humanity, they feel are actually much higher. Now, just to give a little bit more insight into Mr. Musk, especially when he was younger, I'm sure many of you here have at some point heard the interview that Elon's babysitter, Rosemary, gave. I heard it on a different channel. I think it was Right On Radio back in 2021, 2022. And Rosemary gave an interview there. And so she just did about 3 weeks ago, she did an interview with John Pounders from Now You See TV. I think it says Pounders Quest. It's a new series he started with just him where he's interviewing people. And I will make sure to link that in the video's description. I will also give a link to the document of Dr. John Coleman, so you guys can read that as well. But let me read to you what Rosemary had to say. Now, she was, I think she was probably like 11, 12, or 13, and she was tasked with, she grew up in the system, she was born in the system, grew up in the system. They lived across the street from May Musk. I think Elon was like 3, 4, 5, somewhere in there. And so this is what she says. And this is a transcript from the video interview. She says, when I first woke up, was my son-in-law and said it was 2017 when he came. And I said and he's talking about now Elon's grandfather. And I said his grandpa, Dr. Joshua Norman Haldeman, was arrested for being a technocrat leader, which I guess everybody knew what that meant back then. It was Hitler. We're talking about Nazis. And that they were plotting to take over the world by force with robots. Now, my grandfather, she says, beat up Haldeman, Elon's grandfather. So my grandpa beat up his grandpa and said, what, Canada didn't want you? Well, we don't want you either. You no good, dirty bastard, or whatever she says here. And I guess her grandfather continued, what, fake your own death like Hitler? And those are the words my grandpa said. And I'm not going to go into all the emotions and what else was happening that day, but that was about 1978 or 1979. And then she goes on and she says something, by force with robots. I shared that, which sounded crazy because she's talking about Elon now, he didn't have anything to do with robots. And also when I was a girl, I asked my not blood auntie. So again, in the system, they are usually conceived, especially if they're a high level child like Rosemary, like Elon. If they're going to be something in the system, they are usually conceived by specific bloodlines, but they may or may not end up being raised by the biological parents or the biological mother. And so they'll have a surrogate mom. And in this case, she had a mom, and then she had her mom's sisters, but then it sounds like she lived with like Illuminati aunties. These were her Illuminati aunties that were assigned to her, and not her. So she's saying they're not my blood aunts. But she says, when I was a girl, I asked my not blood auntie, but one of my Illuminati aunties, like the witches. There's always 3 witches. I asked her, is Elon, she said, is Elon, and she says, I always called him Ellie. I said, is he the Antichrist? And she said, no, but he will present the mark. And when you see him do that, the Antichrist will take the stage. Well, these aren't things that I could carry. And then she goes on, she said that's a CIA operation, and some of the things I discussed, although stuttering my brains out, are making no sense because it doesn't make any sense. Meanwhile, Tom O'Neill is writing a book called Operation Chaos, and some of the things I talk about came out in that book in declassified documents. Charlie Manson was in fact CIA with handlers, and he's actually the priest of their church, which is a whole weird thing. And then she goes back and she said, May's father, Dr. Joshua Norman, who faked his death and was already around doing evil secret stuff. Elon, who appears out of nowhere, grows at an odd rate and is always talking about ruling the world and Mars. And she said, May Musk always treated me very well, like as if she was her future mother-in-law. And when Elon slipped with things like that, like when he was talking about Mars and ruling the world and things, she said it scared the crap out of me. When I realized that I was always going to be their genie in the bottle, even though the cover story was that I'm the babysitter from across the street, was all planned years ago. This is part of the plan, and Elon is a pharaoh. I asked if he was human. I asked if he was an experiment. Like I never believed that he was real. He was always growing at an odd rate. The story didn't line up. They had laboratories everywhere. I knew they were doing this stuff because clones are real. Human clones are real. And then John said, I think the question that everybody's interested in is, what made you question if Elon Musk was the Antichrist? What have you seen? And she says, well, he opened the abyss. Rosemary, Elon's babysitter, said he opened the abyss. And I didn't have the language to articulate what was happening. And my aunt would yell at me. Her Illuminati auntie would yell at her and say, why don't you want to go over there anymore? And I said, because he's doing some voodoo, Aunt Peggy. That's what I said. I said, he's just doing voodoo. And I don't want to go over there because I didn't. And I was well read, but I wasn't into science fiction and I wasn't into the occult. I had, in my heart, I loved Jesus and I just wanted to be on Team Jesus. So I tried to rationalize being with these, whatever these were, Illuminati, whatever. So she says, okay, the first time that I remember light, and so you'd have to listen to the whole interview to know that light was May Musk's Illuminati name. So that's what they called May Musk. She says, the first time that I remember light leaving us alone, her with Elon, and Elon was little, she said, I would never have a straight answer from her and no commitment as to how long this time was going to be because she was always going. There was one time where she went to prison and she switched places with one of the Manson girls and stayed in there. I never know when she's coming back. And so and the he she mentions there is somebody named Joaquin. Joaquin would bring me what I needed. When she was stuck babysitting Elon for, it sounds like sometimes days, this Joaquin fellow would bring her what she needed. But Elon, got into his mother's room, and she says, I've worked for a lot of people, and I don't want any children to get into their parents' drugs or whatever they're into. She says, sometimes people leave things laying around or guns or whatever. And she said, I did not want him, Elon, going into his mother's room. And my aunt had put the fear of God into me. Well, she says, not God, but she just kept saying, they're Illuminati. They're the Illuminati. Don't piss them off. So whatever that means. And so he was in his mom's room and he was being sneaky and laughing. And he was running by and he had these weird little artifacts in his hand that I would compare to like little Stonehenge objects. She said they were little rock gods and I would call them gods. And she said, and I had a healthy fear of demonic forces. I didn't want to play with that on purpose. But sometimes he was just running back and forth and he got some things out of his mother's African, which they lived in South Africa. So he got things out of his mother's African trunk. I called it because they were from Africa and something was happening. And I said, come out here, because he would be in his room. And she said, and I didn't like to say his name. So I would just call him little buddy or, hey, honey, come on out of there. And she said, but something was happening. And my aunt had told me, don't let nothing happen to that little kid. And the way she said it, and I never, she says, I always protect kids from dogs and anything. I mean, I'm into horses and monkeys. I'm not afraid of most things. But the way that she said that, I would say to her, why? And she said, he's going to rule the world someday. And so she could not let anything happen to Elon. And so she said, and it always sounded so serious. He's going to rule the world someday. They're the Illuminati. So anyway, when something was happening in there and I was afraid to look and I could see, and I saw his face and he was so happy. And I reached in and I grabbed his arm into the room. Wait, did she say? Because she talked, I don't know if I copied it or not. She talked about there was like a green haze or something weird in the room. But she said he was just so happy. And I reached in and I grabbed his arm. I've had my arm pulled out of socket so many times. I'm very sensitive to ever being, pulling roughly with anyone. But, if you're going to save their life, and she's thinking in the back of her mind, you better not let anything happen to that kid, right? Because it might cost her life. So she said to save them, sometimes you have to possibly grab somebody to save their life. And I grabbed him and I got sucked in with him through this portal. He opened up a portal with these little African dolls that he was playing with. And there were some ancient, glorious ones in there. There was no bottom. So they're in some kind of dimension. They get sucked through a portal, and she grabs a hold of him to try to get him, and she gets sucked in too. And so they're in some kind of dimension with these humongous, who she calls ancient ones. And then she doesn't say it in this interview, but the interview I heard her say a couple years ago, she said they were ancient Egyptian gods, like Thoth, like, the things that you see on the hieroglyphics. And she said they were huge. And she said there were some ancient glorious ones in there. There's no bottom. And she says, I know. And I look and I think this is the abyss. And then she says, one of them grabbed me by the throat, and they were holding her. This one was holding her by the throat, and her legs were dangling. And she said it was very difficult, and I cried out to Jesus to save me. And then she says, but she said, but Jesus saved me. And when she said Jesus, she said the portal closed and they got sucked back out of there. And we rolled through the carpet out of his room, and we were in the living room on the floor laying down, looking at each other. And he said, Moon, why are you not like my friends? And so he always called her Moon. And she says, so now 45 years in the future, I'm an adult and I'm reading my Bible, and I love Revelation. I was afraid of it, but I'm not afraid of it anymore, because it's not revelation of the boogeyman. It's revelation, she says, of Jesus Christ, or Yeshua, right? Of Nazareth, or Messiah. Revelation is about this, that he bought us back. He took this and he won the title back from the earth, and he won us back, and right, but he gave the keys to the abyss, and he got the keys to the abyss and won the keys back, but he gives them to Apollo at the end. Why, I don't know. And he says, but he does in Revelation 10, and Apollo opens the abyss and lets his 4 friends out. I think they're the 4 fallen angels from Genesis 6, she says. And the number of their army is 200 million. Well, that's odd. And she said, I did hear a report about 5 years ago that Elon Musk had 200 million robots ready to rock and roll out of Silicon Valley when the FDA gives him the approval to move forward. And I'm pretty sure that they did move forward. Elon Musk is marching them down main streets and red carpets, and people are cheering. What does the number of their army mean? She says, I've been something about permanent bodies, but they are the children. She's talking about the Nephilim, or the children of the fallen angels, and these fallen angels were never meant to have children. They don't. So these disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, she says, they don't have bodies or disembodied spirits, and they need a body. So she says, I'm going to do some deductive reasoning here, and I think it doesn't matter, but A plus B could equal C. The AI, she says, it seems to me that the ghost is in the machine. It seems to me that the beast is coming forward in the tech. And I'm not afraid of the enemy. I want to use the enemy's sword to cut off his own head, like David and Goliath. So she says, I'm just an eyewitness. I'm not just somebody playing some video of what people will think with scary music. I'm telling you what I saw. And so she's basically saying that in her opinion, she thinks that these disembodied spirits of the Nephilim are going to inhabit Elon's robots. Is basically what she's saying. And the other thing she does not say in this interview is that, but she said it in the interview I heard right on radio. She said that her witch auntie, her Illuminati auntie, when she was always being told, don't let anything happen to that kid, and she asked why, that he would usher in the Antichrist, that he would provide the mark. And then her, if I remember correctly, her witchy aunt said, her Illuminati aunt said, when he goes by the name of El Elyon. So this is why she didn't like to say the name. So he goes by Elon, but her aunt had said if he ever goes by the name of El Elyon, that the time is here. So, for whatever that's worth. Okay, moving on. And I know this has been long. We're down to our last couple slides. So thank you guys for, hopefully you've hung in there with me. Brzezinski went on to say, this is the guy who wrote the Technotronic book. Brzezinski went on to say that our society, quote unquote, is now in an information revolution based on amusement focus. So we've gone from being industrialists and producing, and then we were deindustrialized, right? And I think that happened in the 1980s, 1990s. All of the industry went to other countries, quote unquote, because it was too expensive to manufacture here, right? But it was all part of the plan to make us weak, to make us dependent on other countries and the corporations of the Committee of 300. Okay, it was to weaken us. And so Brzezinski is saying now, instead of an industrialization age, we are now in an information age based on amusement focus, right? We want to be entertained all the time with spectator sports and saturation coverage by television sporting events, which provide an opiate for increasingly purposeless masses. And Dr. Coleman says, was Brzezinski another seer and prophet? Could he see into the future? The answer is no. What he wrote in his book was simply copied from the Committee of 300's blueprint given to the Club of Rome for execution. Isn't it true that by 1991 we already have a purposeless mass of citizens? Well, I don't know. Should we say we're here 2025? Do we have a purposeless mass of citizens? How many movie stations are there on our TVs? Prime, Netflix, Stars, I don't know, Hulu, however many, movie theaters, television programming stations, like you name it, constant amusement, constant things to distract us, right, from how miserable our world is that we live in. They don't want us to focus on making changes to all of the bad stuff that we see, right? They're counting on the fact that we are going to stick our head in the sand and become so overwhelmed that we are just, we're going to get sucked into our social media for hours on end. Living in an online world because this physical world is too painful. Okay. We could say that 30 million unemployed and 4 million homeless people are a purposeless mass, or at least the nucleus of one. In addition to religion, the opiate of the masses, which Lenin and Marx acknowledged was needed, we now have the opiates of mass spectator sport, unbridled sexual lusts, rock music, and a whole new generation of drug addicts. Mindless sex and an epidemic of drug usage was created to distract people from what is happening all around them. In the Tectonic era, Brzezinski talks about the masses as if a people are some inanimate object. which is possibly how we are viewed by the Committee of 300. He continually refers to the necessity of controlling us masses. And lastly, Brzezinski was not writing as a private citizen, but as Carter's national security advisor and a leading member of the Club of Rome and a member of the Committee of 300. He was also a member of the CFR and a member of the old Polish black nobility. His book explains how America must leave its industrial base behind and enter into what he called a distinct new historical era. One of the chapters in the Tectonic Era explains how new technology will bring in its wake intense confrontation that will strain social and international peace. Oddly enough, we are already under intense strains through surveillance. Lourdes in Cuba is one place where this is happening. The other is NATO headquarters in Brussels, Belgium. And I want you to catch what I'm about to say. The other is in Brussels, Belgium, where a giant computer designated 666, or its name, this giant computer in Brussels, Belgium, is named 666. And it can store data of every type mentioned by Brzezinski, plus possessing an expanded capacity to take in data for several billions more people than presently exists, if it ever comes to that. But he says, but which, in the light of the Global 2000 Genocide Report, will probably never need to be utilized. Retrieval of data will be simple in the United States, where Brzezinski and his committee of 300 colleagues could simply add Social Security and or driver's license numbers to 666 to provide the surveillance recording announced. And personally, I think that this whole ID 20, this Real ID program, is probably linked to that. Okay. So, let me come back here. So, very, very sobering information. Lot of information. I do hope you'll go and take screenshots and do some further research. Next week, we're going to go through a little bit more of what the Committee of 300 has planned for us. And then we are going to hopefully start talking about who those some of those black nobility families are. Okay. I'll have to see how much more information we need to get through. So I do this, you guys, not to scare you, but I mean, everything in our world just feels scary right now. I just find myself sighing all the time because I just, it's just like wake up every day and it's like, what fresh hell, are we going to be presented with today? And this is all, Scripture tells us. Scripture tells us that, Messiah again said, in this world you will have trouble, but be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. And, he says in other scripture, he said that, the enemy will try to wear us out. Like, I don't know about you, but I feel weary. But we have to cling to him like we've never clung before. Because we serve the Most High Creator. And he has us in his hand. Okay? If you are his child, if you are a disciple, if you are a follower of his son, Yeshua, of Nazareth, the Messiah, if you are born again, if you are on that vine, if you're even grafted into the vine, okay, he's got you. But we need to stop being entertained. We need to stop trying to distract ourselves because we're afraid. We have to be vigilant, and we have to be on guard. And we have, I pray Psalm 91 over myself and my family so much. I encourage you, dig into the Word, go through those Psalms and read them over yourself, because that there's one thing I know. These people may seem like they're invincible. They've got control of the whole world. They've created a net from the top down. But they have one major blind spot. The little g god they serve, Lucifer, which we'll get into Lucifer in another video as well. They think he's the good guy. They think he's the creator. And you and I know well enough to know that Lucifer is a created being. And so they have underestimated our Father and our Lord. They've underestimated him. And I think this is why these plans that the Committee of 300 and the Club of Rome have not been completely fulfilled, is he keeps thwarting them. The Most High keeps thwarting them and putting wrenches in their cogs and frustrates them. And I think they're not getting the stuff done that they wanted to get done. And this is why this is drug out far longer than what they have planned. And so we need to be of good cheer. We need to be sober-minded, not distracted, fasting and praying as the Holy Spirit leads, and asking what our part is. What does the Most High want us to do to help make it very difficult for these people? So we put our hope in him, and we don't grow weary, or we don't give up when we do grow weary. So all that to say, thank you for spending this time with me, and you guys are just precious. I thank you so much for your support, your kind words, and I pray that you have a blessed week in spite of whatever the enemy throws your way. Let's not get too caught up in the television crap and news, because it's just meant to discourage us. Like, find joy in the little things. Find joy in your pet or your child or your children. Find joy in the nature in your backyard. Find joy in the little things to help keep you centered. And don't forget, we must not lose our humanity. We must continue to be a light to the people around us. We have to continue to show love and kindness. Smile at somebody. Do something kind for somebody. We cannot let these people steal our humanity from us. We cannot turn on one another. Okay, we are called to do good and show justice and kindness. So with that, take care. I will see you next week. Okay, bye-bye.